about, you know, being romantic, right? And specifically around husbands maybe trying to be romantic and trying to figure out how to maybe for husbands that are not necessarily super romantic about how to cultivate that, develop that, and from the perspective of the wife's question, you know, how can a wife help facilitate that? How can a wife not sabotage that and kind of shoot herself in the foot in terms of what it is that she's wanting to develop? So I think this is a common experience, and certainly one that's very personal to me. You know, that there's some guys out there who grew up and maybe they have older sisters, you know, and that they're you know, a younger sibling with older sisters, or they have a dad that's just very romantic and suave and kind of modeled for his sons kind of how to romance a woman and how to engage in that way. And for me, I had neither. And that I'm a firstborn in my family, no older siblings. I have a sister, but she's 8 years younger than me. My dad was possibly the least romantic man ever to exist. And so I had absolutely nothing to draw from as a newly married man in terms of knowing how to be romantic. And it's just not fair. Like I look at, I have a 12-year-old son, and he has older sisters and has grown up around women his whole life. And he just has like this intuitive nature about what it is his sisters kind of want to hear and how to affirm them and compliment them in ways that, you know, aren't intended to be romantic, but you can just see it flows really naturally. You know? And I'm like, what? It's not fair. And that I feel handicapped. and how to approach this. So I can appreciate the question from a husband's standpoint. You know, for all the men out there that are in my boat and didn't grow up with sisters or a dad that kind of modeled that it's tough. It's tough to kind of, there's not one, for me, one bit of it that just like happens unintentionally, or just happens in a natural flow of me being me.
Aww. I think it's good that you're normalizing that though, because I think there can be this expectation on, you know, of course it's such a healthy desire for women to have, for wives to have, to be romanced and to desire that. And that is very healthy. And, but I think of balancing that with that might be something that's developed throughout your relationship for a lifetime. And so of being able to have the long game in mind and not have these expectations that your husband should be able to romance you and with the type of thoughtfulness that really it might take 10 years to develop. 10 years of you explicitly sharing what feels good to you and what you would like and what you need, not having the expectation that he just intuitively knows what you need or knows what you want, but that there's a sense of, you know, just vulnerably sharing, like, this would be really fun sometime if we ever did this. And just being very, like, the things that are in your heart that you desire, to share them with your husband and not feel like if I have to share them, then it's not as romantic. If he doesn't come up with it on his own, and it's like, oh, that's like impossible standards for him to live up to, you know, because if he did for you what he would want, you know, then that is not going to resonate with you in the same way that he needs information about you. Because if you did for him what you would want, that's not going to probably resonate with him. So, you know, I think having that understanding that that's something that is rhythm that's built in a relationship over many, many years of sharing and expressing. I mean, I remember being newly married and I threw my husband, it's like if you know my husband, I threw him a surprise party with all of these people, this like house full of people. And it is like, now know it's my husband. That's what I would want. Never, ever what he would want, Josh. And over the years when we became more open and he was like, yeah, I really hated that. That was horrible. It was like, like one of his worst nightmares. And so I think that those are the kind of learning experiences that we have to have a lot of grace for. That as, both spouses kind of venture out and make themselves vulnerable and try something, really appreciate the effort and the thoughtfulness of trying, and to let that be what's romantic and not be looking for this like magical hallmark moment. And if your husband can't create that, then he's not romantic. Because I think that that can be a really skewed kind of perspective to have, that really steals like the true romance out of a relationship, which is this sense of like growing together, building together, developing this like knowing of each other, that is really, really special. And so
I so appreciate it. As a husband, I so appreciate all the different pieces that you've highlighted. There's just, I mean, that's a clip worth listening to again and kind of revisiting, because there's so many nuances in what you just shared, Tish, that are super, super valuable. From the vantage point of the Hollywood kind of myth that undermines so many relationships, that says, if he really loves you, he will be able to read your mind and know what exactly what it is that you want, and be able to deliver that without you having to express any sort of insinuation that you are interested in that. That's the signature of true love right there. Right. In which, to many men are like, right, that our mind reading abilities suck. Like we just don't have Vulcan mind meld, just not able to read our spouse's mind. And it's not that we don't love our wife,
right,
don't want to be pleasing to her, don't want to delight her. It's that we can't read minds. We can't. And maybe we can get lucky every now and then. A blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. We can like pull off a lucky guess, timing. But there's also this piece that, the bait and switch of sorts that happens in dating and getting married, right? Because there's a lot of times wives will be in that place like, wait a minute, that's baloney. I'm not buying that one instant. When we were dating, he was like on target with all of those things. And there's that's a fair kind of confusion that's there, right? That there's this kind of bait and switch thing that happens in dating versus marriage, right? That on the husband side of it, I see a lot of husbands that are like, she couldn't keep her hands off me when we were dating. It's like she was interested in cuddling and interested in physical affection, engagement, and our whole relationship. We had to like work hard to create any sort of boundaries in a relationship whatsoever. And now we've been married for a little bit, and it's like, she's pursues or initiates sex maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And I'm like, what happened?
right.
That's not the vision of what I thought married sex life was going to look like. I thought it was going to look a lot more like the pursuit and initiation. I've been tricked, bait and switch, different dynamic. Or for the wife, like in this dynamic, that a sexually charged single man pursuing a woman who's obsessively thinking about her all the time, can't get her off her mind, and is constantly kind of wooing and pursuing and engaging and as like number one focus to the neglect of all other things in life, but that singular focus and pursuit. And then we get married and it's like, wait a second, where'd all that attention go? Where did all that intentionality, where did all of that pursuit go? Now he's like, I feel like I've dropped way down on the priority and importance list. What's the deal with that? That's a really common kind of dynamic for husbands and wives to experience, kind of navigating, grieving in some ways, some of the changes that happen in the relationship when we move from dating kind of dynamic into a marriage dynamic that are not bad, but are different.
Yeah.
And really require intentionality in ways that maybe flowed much more naturally before. And
Yeah.
that the hormones and excitement of dating kind of made that pursuit of physical initiation, didn't have to think about it very much, right? And it didn't require a whole lot of intentionality.
Yeah.
When we get into marriage, we need to be a little bit more intentional, that if we only initiate and pursue when we hormonally have that push and I'm in that place within our cycle that we, right around ovulation where body drops an egg and gives a little hormonal push and says, go find your man and fertilize this thing. We only connect around then we're going to have distance and disconnect within the relationship. Likewise, for a husband, if you only engage in ways that are pursuing, romancing, or when you think about it, like Valentine's Day, when there's all sorts of signs kind of flashing saying, don't forget, then that's probably not going to put all the deposits in your spouse's love bank that she needs. Okay?
Yeah.
It requires more intentionality, and that intentionality isn't a reflection of not loving or not being into you. Getting back to that myth of, if he was really into me, then he wouldn't have to work. This wouldn't be work, it'd be easy. Like, it would just like flow, be natural. You just think of these things and do them.
I know. Oh, what you're saying is so important. The intentionality doesn't negate passion or romance.
Right.
And I think that you're talking about the shift of dating and the thrill of the pursuit and of the newness and even of like the hormonal response in the body of what's happening chemically, and then transitioning into marriage. That's a really important part of transitioning. That it does, anyone who's passionate about anything, they've been very disciplined and intentional about learning about that subject or about that thing, and that intentionality has actually translated into deeper passion. And that is, I think, the shift you're talking about that happens from dating into marriage. And so to have the expectation that the ease of falling in love, that should be carried into like the building of a marriage, and kind of what our relational rhythms look like, and that doesn't require intentionality. Oh, it's just so much, it's an impossible pressure to live up to.
Totally. And us men, we tend to avoid failure like the plague. Like, it's why I don't golf, right? Because I'm terrible at golfing. And that if my buddies call me up and say, Josh, you want to go golfing? I'm like, no way. Why in the world would I want to go out for a scramble and look like a fool and just have my total inadequacy as a golfer put on display for all the world, for you guys to make fun of me at? Not going to do it. I'm just totally going to avoid that domain where I feel like a failure. Okay? And so there's this dynamic that can get set up sometimes in a relationship that unintentionally, wives can actually sabotage the very thing that they want by sending this message about how much their husband sucks at being romantic and that, and uh, maybe instead of appreciating effort, kind of criticizing the missing the mark or falling short or not being exactly the way that was hoped for, not living up to the fantasy of that, can over time, and it doesn't take very much time because this men are kind of weak egoed, kind of tender souls that we try to hide behind our toughness, and that then can really feel like a failure in that department and can really avoid that. And just be like, I'm not even going to try in order just to be criticized or fail at that again. I'm just going to say, that's not me. You married the wrong man. You're going to have to get over it. And kind of cop out and bail out of uh, putting in that intentionality and that effort, which isn't okay. It's not justifiable. It's not right for a man to take that attitude or that mindset. But there's a flip side of that where a wife can really shoot herself in the foot in some ways by being maybe what in her mind is trying to be helpful to her husband by either comparing to another husband and saying, she's maybe trying to hint at things that he could do to help uh, that department out a little bit more, but is inadvertently kind of creating this criticism and comparison piece that just feels defeating and to her husband and gets her further away from the very thing that she wants. I don't know if you've ever had that.
Yeah, I mean, as you share this, it makes me feel sad because I think it's robbing both of them from what they want. And I think of the expectation can really be kind of the launching off point of this lose-lose that you describe. That in the same way as we were talking about sexuality is this rhythm of expressing what we need and what we want, and that's very unique on our personality and where we're at this season of our life in this moment, that we're very unique individuals, and part of marriage is about building these internal maps of each other. And for, as if you're a wife desiring your husband to be more romantic, of being able to invite him into that space about sharing what you want, but not in a demanding way, but in a way that sets him up for success. That we're teaching each other how to be thoughtful. We're teaching each other how to know each other in a way that feels very intimate. And so now I know when I want to be thoughtful on my husband's birthday, I know that it looks very different than a surprise party with a house full of people. And, I've been married this is just fresh in my mind this week. I've been married for 15 years and I've just changed this is really a simple example, but was a season in my marriage I really liked fresh flowers. And then, so I was like, so I made that clear. Like, I would love fresh flowers for special occasions or for my birthday. That would mean a lot to me. That would be like, I would love that as a gift. But then there was a season that I'm like, that's not practical. I would want to use that money for something else. Like, this is what would feel good to me or thoughtful to me. But then just recently, I think like a month ago, I told him, this poor man, I was just how much I changed. And I was like, you know what? I think I miss fresh flowers. Like, if you would want to send them to me, like, just know that they would be welcomed. And this man, look at this.
Oh, Josh. And he's nailing it. Way to go, Hedger.
It meant so much to me. And how in the world could he read my mind or know that all of a sudden, but I think that a wife shooting herself in the foot can be like, it comes out as more like, why don't you ever like send me flowers, or why don't you ever do thoughtful things for me? Or because I think in a wife, it can really bring up insecurity. Like, if I was desirable enough, then he would want to pursue me and romance me. But he's not doing that. So either there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong with him. And we can get lost in this in the same way with sexuality of if I'm desirable enough, then they're going to be able to meet my needs and want me. Or if I am like suave enough, then I'm going to be able to meet her needs and sweep her off her feet. And the truth is, with it all, we are building internal maps of each other. And that's something that we build our whole lives. And so I don't know, maybe next year I'll be out of my fresh flower phase and I'll be sure to let my husband know.
I so appreciate that, Tish. And I think there's a lot of husbands out there that are like Josh and like myself. They're in that space of we really do want to love our wife well. We really do want to engage in ways that make her feel special and that known and pursued and cared about, and that there's a real appreciation that I have when Cassie does the same things that you are talking about that set us both up for success, kind of help me know the things that she would enjoy and things that her heart is longing for, and is not like subtle and just kind of floating that out there in a passing kind of comment, hoping that I will pick up on that because I won't, in that, or even a really blatant hint, kind of in that hint in that, because I won't pick up on that either. But just a really explicit, hey, I would love it if you would do this for me. That you know, in fact, you know, my birthday's coming up in a month, and this would be great.
Yes.
The likelihood of that happening for her just went up like 1,000,000%. And then I have the opportunity to win with my wife, knowing exactly how to win with her. And it's a win for her, it's a win for me. And that just really sets us both up for success in a way that is, you know, really cool versus, you know, being set up for failure in a way that can really create a negative cycle for us. And, you know, the interesting thing about that dynamic is over the years, and it has been years, like you said earlier, Tish, the early in our relationship, we fought like cats and dogs about those kinds of things. And I felt defeated and she felt unloved, and it was just ugly kind of place. And as we both matured and grew in those things and have been walking in that over time, many of those things have, that internalized mapping has taken place for me in a way that I find that I do and am able to engage in ways that that I think of or that happen for me without her prompting or without her communicating, that flow out of that, internalizing that over the course of our relationship in a way that I never did or could early in our relationship. And that's been really cool for me to be able to do that, but it's also been really cool for her in a way that I don't think it would have ever materialized if we hadn't been able to mature through kind of that earlier phase of unrealistic expectations that we had for each other.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you shared that. That's so good. And so I think of what we're saying is to not have the expectation that what takes 20 years to build should be automatic, intuitive, and in place after you walk down the aisle. But instead, that's part of being special to someone and making someone special to you is this continual, I'm intentionally setting my affection on you. I'm intentionally pursuing to know you better. Help me know you better. And I'm going to be vulnerable and I want you to know me better. And that explicit sharing our wants and desires is so key in every facet of our relationships.